No introduction. Our next speaker is Dr. Debajit Palit. Debajit Palit holds a master's degree in physics and has a PhD degree in energy policy. He is the director of Rural Energy and Livelihoods. Dr. Debajit Palit works in the field of clean energy access and distributed generation, rural electrification policy and regulation, solar photovoltaics, and biomass gasification. He joined TERI in 1998 and has since been working on projects related to renewable energy technologies, designs and implementation, resource assessment and energy planning, clean energy and rural electrification policy and regulation, monetary impact assessment and capacity building. He has vast national and international experience and has undertaken a number of projects in over 15 countries across South and Southeast Asia, Sub-Sahara Africa. He has also worked in different states across India for UN and bilateral organizations, foundations, national governments, and corporates. He has also written widely on international and rural electrification issues, particularly on South Asia, and has more than 70 research publications in scholarly journals, conference proceedings, and books. He is a sought after speaker on rural energy issues, distributed renewable energy generation, and energy poverty nexus, and has participated in a number of national and international conferences and workshops across Asia, Africa, Europe, and America. Dr. Palit represents TERI, which is a recognizable institute at the Steering Committee of Energy for All Partnership of the Asian Development Bank and is a member of the LVDC Distribution Committee ETD 50, steered by the Bureau of Indian Standards. Earlier, he was also a member of the Technical Committee of Decentralized Distribution Scheme under National Rural Electrification, Government of India. Dr. Palik is here with us. He will speak on the topic renewable energy scope for rural development. So now I will request Dr. Palik to please, I will transfer the rights to Dr. Palik and he will speak. Hmm? Wait a moment, Dr. Debajit Palik is just joining us. He will join us shortly and speak on the topic. Please keep patience and wait for the speaker to join us. He is a very eminent speaker and he will give his talk very shortly. Dr. Debajit Paling is trying to log in. He is very shortly he will leave us. He has some connectivity issues and he is trying to log in through the WebEx platform. He will very shortly join us. Please be patient and be patient for his talk. He is a very eminent speaker. Please be there with us. I request all the participants to there with us through his talk. And at the end of the talk of Dr. Debajit Palit, we will have a common question, answer, and query session where both the speaker will answer your queries and about the rural scenarios and sustainable development on renewable energy and whatever queries you have related to their talks. And at the end of the session, we will share the PDF and presentation of both the speakers to you.
Sir, please clear about the attendance link. It would be shared in the chat box or in the group.
Attendance is directly marked in the website of Atal AICTE. There is a login of Lucknow University and it is directly marked. Those who are present here, there is directly marked present and they will generally automatically generate certificate and you will be able to get the certificate via mail.
Okay, sir, what about the feedback link?
Feedback link will be also sent to you via group and mail also. It is at the end of the 5th day. So you need not worry.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
If you have any other queries, then we will let us know.
Ma'am, tell me about attendance report, ma'am.
Attendance, it is marked automatically in the system of the website of AICTE Atal where the FDP is scheduled, and you will generate the certificate automatically and you will get it via mail.
Okay, ma'am.
What is the process for the assessment? It would be daily wise or at the end?
At the end, we are going to take the assessment. And for the attendance, I am checking the participant list. So by your participant list, we are matching the name of the participant who has registered. And if there will be any anomaly in the name, I will just ask the concerned person. So we are having your details on Atal site. So, and we can see your name on the here also, on this WebEx also. So we are going to match it. We are putting the attendance on our own.
Okay. Ma'am, let me know something about the process of assessment. How it would be conducted?
So we are going to give a Google form, some questions on Google form.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Debajit is with us here, and he will line making him. Now he will be able to share with you. Dr. Sir, Debajit sir, are you here, sir? I am making the host.
Yeah.
You can share. You can start your talk, sir. I have introduced yourself to the participant and all the respected dignitaries, sir. You can share your talk, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for being there. It's our immense pleasure to have you here, sir.
Is the PPT visible?
Yes, sir.
Participant, please reply. Is it visible to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is visible.
Visible, sir.
It's visible.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So good afternoon to all. So I think there are a lot of participants. Am I audible? No.
Sir, you are audible, yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So in case, okay. Thank you. So I have been requested to make a presentation at this faculty development, and the topic that I have been given is renewable energy setup for rural. Well, you all are faculties dealing with renewable energy, so I'm not going to discuss what is renewable energy and this one, but definitely I would like to build a context. But before I build a context, let me just share the brief about organization TERI. I don't know how many of you might be knowing about TERI, this one, but I assume that most of you might be knowing about TERI. But still, those who are not aware about TERI, for them. So we are an independent multidimensional organization with capabilities in research, policy, consultancy, and implementation. And we are headquartered in New Delhi with regional centers in different places across India, across the different regions of India. And in our journey, close to 5 decades. So we were started in 1974. So it's about 47 years that we are in this space. So we have been instrumental in shaping policies on energy conservation and energy efficiency in India, developed clean lighting and cooking solutions that have touched over 5 million people in India and Africa. And I will discuss more about this during the presentation. We've developed sustainable energy efficiency solutions for India's small, medium, and micro enterprises, and also pioneered the use of biotechnology in the petroleum and agriculture sector. the division that I lead, so I am leading this rural energy and livelihood division at TERI. And my division aims to address the key challenges that inhibit energy provisioning in developing countries, including affordable and reliable clean energy solution through innovative and replicable technologies and delivery models. And energy as a driver of development indicators such as health, education, livelihoods, and gender and social inequality. So we focus on energy for livelihoods, accelerating energy access through research and implementation of lighting and clean cooking projects, and mainstreaming gender and social inclusion in energy programs by creating evidence for better and informed policy making. And Uttar Pradesh is one of the states where we are working very actively in some of the clusters and have been working very actively for almost more than a decade now. So Bihar is another state where we work very actively. Jharkhand is another state where we work very actively. What we do, our framework is built around the rural energy and livelihoods. So we try to impact the household and micro enterprises, communities, policymakers, technology and institutional partners, financial institutions, funding partners, local NGOs, and the local energy enterprises. So we try to work across the energy value chain so as to make an impact on the lives and livelihoods, and as well as policy advocacy and build evidence so as to have a better policy on these themes. So roughly brief or very briefly about my organization TERI. I have been working in this space for more than 24 years now. The renewable energy access, rural electrification space. This one, and I've been part of different government committees on renewable energy and rural electrification, especially the National Rural Electrification Program and some of the committees under the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. I have been very actively worked in UP. I traveled in many districts in UP just to build the context. However, I've never got the opportunity to visit Lucknow University. So this is my first interaction, I would say, with a program which has been organized by Lucknow University, and I'm delighted to share my thoughts and whatever work we have done over the years. So the context of today's session, while the title is about renewable energy for rural setup, what I will try to do is to build a context for the today's session and see how we are moving in that direction. So we all know, and I'm sure that all the participants would be knowing that India signed the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015 and committed to reduce emission intensity of the gross domestic product by 33 to 35% by 2030 from the 2005 level, and increase the share of non-fossil fuels to 40% of the total electricity generation capacity. And after that, we had set a target of 170 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2022. 420 gigawatt. Is there anyone wants to say something?
Paper you will be receiving in MS Team only. Then you have to like assignment I will be posting. You have to submit your answer script in the MS Team only. Okay, ma'am? Yeah.
Can everybody?
Yeah. MS Team will be recording Viva and we will be doing it. Okay. Yeah.
Can I request everybody to mute your mic so that there is no disturbance. Thank you. So
I request everybody from on behalf of the coordinator to let sir speak and mute your mic. At the end, we will have a common conference question where we will solve your queries. So let sir complete this session. And then he will ask you questions. Don't disturb him in between the talk. Thank you, sir. You may proceed with your talk.
Thank you. So India has set targets of achieving 175 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2022, and we all know the Honorable Prime Minister has scaled up the target to 450 gigawatt to be achieved by 2030. This one. Now, while India has achieved near universal energy access, whether it is in the form of lighting under this as part of the Saubhagya program or cooking under the Prime Minister Ujjwala program, And there's been increasing integration of renewable energy to provide affordable, reliable three-phase power supply. But affordable, reliable three-phase power supply in rural areas and adoption of clean cooking remains a challenge. So while the government might have reached out and connected all households with electricity and provided all households with LPG cooking facility, but the adoption of clean cooking remains a challenge because of various concerns, primarily the income inelasticity. And in rural areas, the three-phase power supply is also a challenge. That means everybody is not getting three-phase power supply, or for that matter, single-phase power supply also in many of the states. Some states definitely are getting 24/7 reliable supply, but not all states, including UP. So while renewable energy generation has increased, this is another challenge. Fossil fuels continue to account for about 60% of the total electricity generation capacity in India as on date, as well as fossil fuel use is prevalent in different processing industry for thermal use, like furnace oil, or maybe pet coke, maybe coal, maybe gas. So all these are being used in processing or thermal heating. However, on the positive side, more than 100 gigawatt of solar has either been installed or under installation or bidding. And hopefully the installation will be completed before end of 2022. That's what the target year is for solar. And the year 2016-17 and 2018-19, so basically between 16-17 and 18-19, averaged an annual growth rate of around 24% for the renewable sector. And this would have continued, but the pandemic created a little bit of problem. However, I hope that with the pandemic now is now over, hopefully the pace of implementation will again become fast. There has also been improvements in network infrastructure and power markets have aided renewable energy integration in the grid, and T&D losses have also declined from as high as 34% in 2002 to less than 20% in 2019 for most of the states. There are still few states where T&D losses are high. Now, what is the importance of electrification or rural energy or energy for the rural areas? Now, this is something that many of us, of the stakeholders, is not aware of. And during my PhD research, I found out that it was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar who actually prepared the first blueprint for electrification in India. We only know about Ambedkar as the founder of the Indian Constitution or the founding father of the Indian Constitutions. But beyond that, he has also done and prepared blueprint for electrification in India, for water supply and water resource management in India as chairman of the Committee on Public Utilities and Electricity in 1943, when he was part of the British India government at that time as the secretary or the head of the Department on Public Utilities and Electricity. And the whole genesis or the base on which the electricity and the energy model of the country is rest on a question which he asked at that point of time to the committee members, that why do we want cheap and abundant electricity? And we continue to ask this question actually even after almost 75 years. Why do we want cheap and abundant electricity in India? The answer is that without cheap and abundant electricity, no effort for the industrialization of India can succeed. And you ask another question, why is industrialization necessary? So we want industrialization as the surest means to rescue the people from the eternal cycle of poverty in which they are caught. And this was asked in 1943. We continue to ask this question. Probably we have not been able to address everything, but then we have definitely progressed quite a bit from 1943, and I'm going to share some of those things with you. So in 1947, we had 0.3% of the population coverage who were electrified, and the per capita consumption, you can see, was extremely low. But now in 2018 or 2019, we have almost reached universal electrification. More than 98% of the households have been electrified, though there are challenges, but still the connection has been provided to the household. And probably we would also be able to provide reliable supply in another 1 or 2 years of time in all the states. And the per capita consumption has also increased to almost 1200 kilowatt hour per person per year. Of course, if we compare it with the per capita consumption of developed countries, USA, it is about 12,000 kilowatt hour. Europe, it is about more than 6 or 7,000 kilowatt hour. Australia, I think it's also more than 6,000 kilowatt hour, and we are only at 1,200 kilowatt hour. So we might feel sad, but just imagine if we are to reach 6,000 kilowatt hour, then how much resources we would be needing or requiring to reach that place, and will that be sustainable for a country like us, or and how it is going to impact our climate? So I think while per capita consumption is an indicator where we all discuss about it, but I personally feel that this indicator probably has become obsolete now, given the fact that with energy efficiency and demand side management and other things, higher the per capita consumption does not really mean that we are producing better outcome. At a lower per capita consumption, if we can produce better outcome, I think that should be the norm. And we should try to follow that. So energy intensity has become the new indicator, which we have committed that we are going to reduce the energy intensity from our 2005 level by 33 to 35% as we progress to 2030. That's 2030. Now, installed capacity in India we started with about 1,500 megawatt in the year 1947 at the time of India's independence, and today it is about 382 gigawatt. That's about 382,000 megawatt, and 30% of that installed capacity is from renewable. So we were to achieve 40% from non-fossil fuel. Out of that, we have already achieved 38% by 2021. So by 2030, we are supposed to reach 40%, and we have already achieved almost 90% of that. This one. So we assume that we are going to revisit our NDC, the target that was signed as part of the Paris Agreement, and probably in September or October this year, when the conference of parties will be organized, probably we are going to make a change to that, or we are probably the government might announce a more ambitious target to achieve by 2030. This one. So on the left hand side, you can see coal continues to be primary source of electricity, but then the renewable energy is including solar, wind, small hydro is picking up. Waste to energy is picking up, and hopefully we can reach to a situation where the entire energy supply, or at least 80 to 90% of energy supply, is from renewable by say 2050 or maybe 2060. Depends on what the government decides about the date. But I personally feel by 2050 or 2060, we'll be able to reach a position where 80% of our energy supply would be from renewables. That means electricity supply would be from renewables. There have been different village electrification program in India, which helped us in reaching from only 0.3% of the population coverage in 1947 to almost 100% household electrification in 2019. Mainly the programs since 2003, Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Vidyutikaran Yojana, decentralized distributed generation, Deen Dayal Upadhyaya Gram Jyoti Yojana, and then Saubhagya program. And now I think there is also an Atal Jyoti program Yojana. So all these things helped us. I'm not going into the name. Different governments has come at different times, and based on their ideological moorings, they might have decided on a name. But overall, the National Rural Electrification Program was carried forward irrespective of the government that was in at the central level. And we could see some this one in 1981, most of the country was in black. That means either 20% or below household electricity coverage. However, it continued to increase, and then in 2018, except UP, the entire country had more than 90% of household electrification. And now after 2019, almost, or rather all states in the country have more than 98% connectivity to household. No matter whether everybody is getting 24/7 supply. So as I said, the Electricity Act of 2003 was the primary driver for what has happened. So if the Electricity Act of 2003 had not contained some of the provision that is listed in my presentation, then probably we would not have reached the electrification rate where we are. And must give credit to the government and the minister of that time that they thought long term and included some of the provisions in the act which made it mandatory for the central government to ensure electrification of all households in the country. And because of that, the Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Vidyutikaran Yojana was launched in 2005, and then with the change in government, this one, the Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana was launched, and finally the Saubhagya was launched. This one. Otherwise, the electrification would have been carried forward by the state, and state doesn't have enough resources, and we still would have, say, around 70 or 80% of the country electrified as on date. But thanks to this act, which made it obligated, the central government will also ensure electrification of all households in the country. It also unbundled the different state electricity board to have more efficiency. It's a different matter that they probably were not very successful in this front because many electricity authorities are still not efficient. This one. But then it started the process. It started the process of encouraging private sector participation in generation, transmission, and distribution, resulting that we have now self-sufficient in electricity generation. So we have almost 383 gigawatt of generation capacity, out of which our peak demand is only roughly around 200 gigawatt, which we achieved, I think, last week. Otherwise, the PLF of the power plants are at anything between 50 to 60%. So we have sufficient generation capacity. The transmission capacity has also been increased. The challenge continues to be with the distribution, and as I said, the operating efficiency of the electricity utilities need to be increased, and then this challenge would also get addressed. So what further options the the Electricity Act provided? So the rural electricity delivery options, they included, the Act allowed us to have different provisions to expand in the rural areas or to provide electrification through in areas with access with no grid. This one either through off-grid individual systems or off-grid collective systems like mini grids, or such areas are licensed, and such areas are also license exempted, that NGOs and small companies and rural entrepreneurs can also chip in and can contribute to the electrification in the country following a non-governmental model. This one, and that really helped in accelerating the pace of electrification in the country. So you can find number of rural mini grids in case of Uttar Pradesh being run by different companies, like many private companies in different places, including by NGOs like TERI. And this was only made possible because the Electricity Act had such delivery options to be implemented in areas with no grid, or in areas where the grid is there, but then the grid is not reliable or sufficient. So this is the background of what we have achieved as far as electrification and renewable energy, as far as electrification is concerned. However, going ahead, what is being discussed in almost all forums is that the centralized large-scale electric utilities that we have in the different states, whether it is in UP or any other states in India, probably in the years to come has to change its model, the way it is operating, to a more distributed utility, where generation can also happen at the distribution grid level. So you can't have a generation rooftop generator in your house, or maybe a small power plant in institutions or an university or any place or a health center, and this can also be connected to the grid, distribution grid, for feeding electricity and taking electricity from the grid as and when the situation demand, that's how the distributed utility will function. So currently is a centralized utility where you generate electricity in large plants or hydropower stations or in large solar power plant, and it is a one directional flow of electricity from thermal power stations to the transmission line to sub-transmission to distribution, finally to your house. But then tomorrow's distributed utility might have a different framework totally, where the large power plants would also be generating, and there would also be power plants at the consumer house, who we nowadays call prosumers. So they will also produce and also consume, and electricity there can also be local trading of electricity, peer to peer. That means one neighbor selling electricity to his or her neighbor, something like that, depending on the demand and surplus. So there might be electricity markets which can develop. So something of that sort is going to happen in the very near future with more and more renewable energy in the grid. So with that as the background, I wanted to give you how the evolution of renewable energy has happened in India. So how it has evolved over the years, and this is a history of renewable energy, which probably many of our current policymakers are also not very aware of totally. So it's very extremely important to understand the context, and then you can plan your future accordingly. There is a saying that आप जितने अपने पीछे देख सकते हो हिस्ट्री को, उतना ही आगे आप अपना प्लानिंग कर सकते हो. So that's why it is extremely important to understand what we have done, how we have done, what mistakes we might have made, what good best practices we had, so that we can plan accordingly. So I'm not going into the detail of renewable energy. I'm sure that you all know about renewable energy. This one, we all know that wind, solar, small hydro, all the geothermal, tidal power, all considered as renewable energy because they directly come from natural resources, and they don't have a limited supply like the fossil fuels, and thus can be used repeatedly. There are advantages and disadvantages. Again, these are dilute forms of energy, though the advantages is inexhaustible, very secular in nature, available everywhere and to everybody at almost no cost, non-polluting and safe. But there are daily variation, seasonal variation, and local variation, and that's why these challenges makes our task little difficult to design a project. This is the solar radiation map in India. Total potential that has been worked out by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy is roughly around 750 gigawatt peak. Though our target is to achieve 400 gigawatt peak, 450 gigawatt peak, but then technically some universities have estimated, University of California, Santa Barbara has estimated that we can still achieve up to 600 gigawatt peak of energy in India easily. So that's a great thing. These are the cumulative solar installation in India. You can see it has progressed quite a bit in the last 3 or 4 years, starting from 2009-10 when it was just 10 megawatt to now almost 34,628 megawatt in 2019-20, and another roughly 40 megawatt are under at various stages of installation, and hopefully in the next 1 or 2 years will also be achieved there. The top 10 states in solar installation, Karnataka is at the top. Uttar Pradesh is also within the top 10. But Karnataka, Rajasthan, and Tamil Nadu are the top 3 as per the ministry figure. Cumulative system installed in case of decentralized systems like lantern, solar lamps and study lamps, home lights, solar home lights, solar street lights, solar pumps and SPV plants. So this has also been increasing, as you can see from the table. 3 years it has also been increasing quite a bit. This one. So all in all, we are at the right pathway. We are progressing, and we are trying to transition to a energy future. When we will become net zero, these are things that the government has to take a call. Now, what is the history of renewable energy? When did we started this journey? So we actually started this journey in 1976 with the New Energy Sources Division within the Department of Science and Technology being formed. At that time, I think Mrs. Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister of the country, and she got extremely fascinated with renewable energy after attending the 1971 summit in Rio, I think, if I remember correctly, the climate summit there. And after that, she started this new energy sources division within the Department of Science and Technology. This was evolved into a commission for additional sources of energy in March 1981. Again, when she came back to power. And within a year, the commission was made into a department in the then Ministry of Energy. After the Indian Prime Minister, Srimati Gandhi, was convinced with the utility of renewable energy system and its promotion, after visiting the Department of Science and Technology's Integrated Renewable Energy Center in Masoodpur village, which is now Basant Kunj, where the Vasant Hotel is located. So there was a Urja Gram there in Masoodpur. The Urja Gram was created by the DST, and they invited the Prime Minister to visit that site. And she got so impressed with the solar the solar energy and the biogas and some of the other things that were implemented there, that the Commission for Additional Sources of Energy was made into a full-fledged department in the Ministry of Energy, so as to promote renewable energy in the country. And this Department of Non-Conventional Energy was further developed into a full-fledged ministry in 2002. This one, and to Ministry of Non-Conventional Energy Sources, and then it was the ministry was renamed as Ministry of New and Renewable Energy in, if I remember correctly, in 2004, 2005, around that time. This one. So how we progress? So in 1980, when the Department of Non-Conventional Energy Sources was started, so we were primarily it was a research-based program where standalone solar systems, wind, hydro, and all these things were being promoted. Over a period of time, we learned that about new technologies, and solar mini grids started to be promoted, wind and solar hybrid, mini hydro, biomass-based power generation, and biomass for thermal use. So all these things were brought in. The two big programs, National Program on Improved Cook Stove in 1982 and National Program on Biomass Development in I think in 1984 were started at that time to promote the use of renewable energy at that point of time. So between 1990 and 2000, these are done. And then 2010, 2012 onwards, we started working on smart mini grids and more of the smarter system. The mistake that we made at that time is that all these things we started to do from rural areas. So any technology adoption or promotion, if we start it from the extreme remote areas where there is no facility for after sales maintenance support, then it is bound to fail. So if a technology is promoted, say, from peri-urban areas, if not urban areas, then you have the ecosystem to provide all the necessary support for maintenance and promotion of that technology. And if it succeeds, then it can easily penetrate the rural areas. Mobile phone is a classic example, or many of the other technologies which are always started in urban areas or peri-urban areas, and then gradually the prices is reduced because of economies of scale, and then they start its promotion or its penetration in the rural areas. The fault line with the renewable energy program in India, to me, is that we started this program in extreme remote areas. And because of that, initially there were technology failures, there were institutional model failures, there were financial issues with subsidy being provided, and we created a market which is based on subsidy. So we never tried to create a market for the renewable energy. We created a system where without subsidy, nothing gets sold in renewable energy. And still in urban areas, I get a lot of calls from my friends who know this one, who that means my acquaintances and other, who would ask me that is there any subsidy for putting up a solar? So maybe the person is earning lakhs and crores of rupees, but still will ask if there are any subsidy. This one, because we developed the market in that manner over the years. And that's why things are still challenging. This one, for promotion of these individual standalone systems in rural and urban areas also. However, the renewable energy mini grids in India had a history, has a very, I would say, very interesting history. Now, the world came to know about mini grids after there is this severe hurricane in Texas some years back, based on which the movie My Name is Khan, I think, was made. This one where it was shown that Shah Rukh Khan is visiting US and helping the victims of that cyclone or whatever it is called. This one there. So the entire world thinks the mini grid thing started from there. But actually, mini grids are started to be implemented in India in Sundarbans and in Chhattisgarh from 1992. So the first mini grids are implemented in 1992. It continued to be implemented after that. By 2000, 2001 or 2002, almost 20 such large mini grids have already been implemented in Sundarban. There are more than 1,200 mini grids in Chhattisgarh implemented till 2005, and almost 90% of them continue to run today. And they were all implemented with state-of-the-art system designs that were available at that time. Of course, in retrospect, I think the initial mini grids were dumb. This one were not smart, but then whatever technology smart was available at that time, it was being used. Mostly community model of service delivery. Multiple technology were adopted like solar, gasifier, wind, as I said. It was all village scale, range of capacities between kilowatt scale, anything between 1 kilowatt to 500 plus kilowatt. This is as part of my PhD work, I tried out where are these mini grids and microgrids located in India and made a map. And you can see almost 5,000, more than 5,000 mini grids has been implemented in India, mostly by government, but a large section of them by the private sector also. The private sector mini grids are mostly in UP and Bihar, whereas the government sector mini grids are mostly in Chhattisgarh and West Bengal and other places. This one. So these are some of the pictures of the solar mini grid in Chhattisgarh and in West Bengal. These are how the battery system. Now the batteries have changed. Now mostly the mini grids are putting up lithium-ion battery pack instead of the lead-acid battery pack that used to be there in earlier time. The distribution line is almost like the grid. So the mini grid is more like a micro version of the grid, and that's why this one is better than a solar home system in a sense that it goes beyond providing lighting to also meet your productive load, whereas the solar home systems or the solar lantern can only provide you lighting solution. These are some of the how they were managing the mini grids. The earlier model where the village energy committee was made responsible for everything. And this is one of the reasons why I feel the mini grid model failed in many states, because the village energy committee in an extremely remote village is not empowered or does not have the adequate exposure to run a mini grids in a technical manner in this one. So after 1 year or maybe 6 months, if there are some problems, they were unable to rectify the problems. And as an implementing agency, we're never going back to such sites after implementing the project. And that's the reason why many of those mini grids failed. But then, and many of the mini grids implemented by the state nodal agencies failed. But then the nodal agencies also tried out hybrid system like solar and wind and gasifier and other things in different places. These are all in experimental basis. Some of them succeeded, some of them has not succeeded, but there are definitely lessons to learn from each one of them. So the CREDA in Chhattisgarh, they came out with a more innovative model where they were involving the village energy committee, but at the same time, they were also entering into a annual maintenance contract with a private party or a private entrepreneur for operation and maintenance, LT line maintenance, and the installation work of the mini grids. And the village energy committee was made responsible for addressing social conflicts and local monitoring. So that made all the changes because of the involvement of the private sector with specific roles and responsibilities and being paid for that. They started taking care of these mini grids, and that's the reason why almost 12 out of the 1,200 to 1,500 mini grids that were at one point of time implemented by CREDA in Chhattisgarh between 2001 and 2010, more than 1,000 mini grids are still working, and they have also been expanded to cover more households and more loads in the village. This is one of the most successful model of mini grids, I would say, in the entire world. Of course, it is a subsidized model, but then this mini grids has actually helped the local population, extremely poor, underprivileged population in those villages to come out from energy poverty and also income poverty. I have interacted with many of them, extreme remote villages. These are all Naxalite affected areas, and many of the youths were, because of the electricity and light provided by the government under as a subsidy, as a subsidized model, a lot of them started going to school. There were class secondary pass out students, college going students from those areas, and that helped this one in restraining them in joining those who are into the business of insurgency and other. So I think this is a great example of how you can provide subsidy in a more productive way so as to create a more I would say positive outcome in remote areas. This one, and this is something extremely good. This one. Then there are of course private sector mini grid model, where is a for-profit entity identifies suitable villages, builds the electricity supply and arranges for operation and maintenance with the help of local partner. Just as a like a micro utility, the micro electric utility. So they have their generation, distribution, billing, maintenance, everything, and the consumers pay for the services that they get. The only difference is that in case of a government utility, they will get the tariff at a rate which is closer to the affordability to pay of the rural population, whereas a profit-making entity would definitely like to set a tariff at which they can recover their investment. And so the tariff is always high. So everybody within the village cannot avail the connection, because those who are extremely poor, they are not taking the connection. Those who can afford, they are only taking the connection in case of a private mini grid supply. But then if one can pay the money, why not take a connection? Because otherwise the other alternative is that they will get unreliable supply. So why not take a connection and get reliability? So some lessons from early mini grids in India. Decentralized, usually low capacity, covering remote areas. As I said, usually domestic load served, so they are not serving the productive load. The battery used to be vulnerable. They are overdrawn by most consumers, making the project non-functional before its lifetime. So if the battery was supposed to run for 5 years, because of overdraw, the battery would get non-functional within 3 years. But again, Chhattisgarh here, because it was mostly tribal population, and they are very disciplined in a way, in their use of electricity. So the batteries were being, the life of the batteries were being extended more than 5 years, in some cases up to 7 years. This one. So also helped in better functioning of the system in Chhattisgarh. The tariff based on flat rate, locally decided depending on maintenance cost and willingness to pay. This one, as I said, mostly non-commercial in nature, and there are difficulty in operation and maintenance because of the remoteness, as I mentioned initially in my at the start of the presentation. Now, a lot of people will ask, are there still there is a role for the mini grids, given the fact that all villages in the country has already been electrified? So I did a study for, I think, 4 years back as part of my work, and I found that there are still drivers as well as barriers for mini and microgrid. Now, the drivers are that if a mini grid has to be successful, then it also has to develop a convergence with livelihood programs or micro enterprise. There should also be some central and state level subsidy for mini grids. There is no working capital financed by banks because they are not covered under the banking channel. So the mini grids as a company should be considered as a within the ambit of definition of MSME, so that they can get working capital financed by banks. This one, renewable energy based hybrid technologies, including hybrid storages for longer supply hours and reliability. And most importantly, the mini grid should also start providing electricity for irrigation in addition to household electrification. Then there would be more demand. But these are some of the things that are not being provided by the existing mini grids. But then going ahead, I think many of the mini grid companies are also trying to address some of the issues that I just highlighted, which can act as a driver for the mini grids, and people would like to take the connection. Some of the barriers are high capital cost, high cost of power. As I mentioned, the private sector mini grids are charging very high cost of power, as high as 40 rupees per kilowatt hour on this one. But they design it in such a way that it doesn't pinch the consumers, this one, because they introduce, it's a high cost of power, but at the same time, energy efficient appliances are provided so that your monthly expenditure on electricity is more or less similar to the expenditure that you incur in case of a government grid. This one almost similar. Of course, there are also barriers, limited market maturity and sales leaks, low capacity and fixed hours of supply, and which are the ones that has to be addressed. So this is in a nutshell how we have progressed as far as the renewable energy and microgrids. I'll highlight in the next 30 minutes two examples, two programmatic examples that my institute TERI is undertaking in the rural areas, focusing in the rural area. So we had a program, many of you might be knowing about it, the Lighting a Billion Lives, which we had started in February 2008 and still ongoing. We started with the aim that we would transition households from kerosene use to cleaner, efficient, low carbon alternatives like solar. And it will operate on an entrepreneurial model of energy service delivery to facilitate last mile clean energy access through commercially viable and socially relevant value chains. We have impacted more than 5 million lives of people across during the last decade across India and also internationally in about 10 African countries. So this is our achievement in the last 10 years, more than 5 million lives impacted, almost 1.1 million households have been illuminated, 36,000 plus solar microgrid connections, 58,000 integrated domestic energy systems, which is a combo pack of solar light and improved cook stove, smokeless cook stove. Then more than 18,000 solar home systems, 175,000 solar lanterns. So these are some of the things that more than 4,237 villages have been lit up, have been provided with this supply. This one, and these are some of the impacts, photographs of impacts that we had this one as part of this program. I'm not going into detail on this, but then there are partnership experiences in the off-grid, whether it is our program or any other program. So there has been social enterprise who are working in the rural areas, entrepreneur-driven partnership, community-based project, pro-poor public-private partnership. So these are the various models of rural energy service delivery in various parts of India, especially in the northern India belt, because that's where the energy access problem is more acute than the southern India. So these are the delivery model that we had followed, where we used to raise corporate social responsibility and government subsidy. And we also used to engage with the local financial institutions who could provide small loans to energy enterprises. We had our technology supplier who would provide the technology products to these energy enterprises, who would then carry out the installation and also responsive after sales service and application to cover more areas. And that's how the households are provided with lighting through lanterns, solar lanterns or fixed lights for both households and small shops. This one. So these are the different technology options that we had covered under the Lighting a Billion Lives, whether it is solar charging station, as I said, integrated domestic energy system where you have a forced draft improved cook stove and a solar light, solar multi-utility where a lot of different activities could be undertaken at a central place, like turmeric grinding, battery charging, bamboo splitting, water purifier, solar lanterns charging, honey extraction. A lot of this productive use could take place at one single site. Then DC mini grids and AC mini grids were also provided. Different type of cook stoves are provided, which were developed by TERI over a period of time. So this is some of the cook stoves that we have developed. Over the period of time. So this is a standardized design of a solar charging station. We standardize the entire thing, and this is extremely important. Now, the Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Vidyutikaran Yojana, or the National Rural Electrification Program, that also standardized this rural electrification program. This one, now the standardization helps in easier scale up. So you don't have to develop a project report or something like that, or a project design for every project. So one standard project based on the requirement and demand at the local area, we use to implement. So there are 5 modules, each module of 1 solar panel, 1 junction box, and 10. So if in a village there are 100 households, so 10 such modules could be implemented. If in a village there are 40 households, so 4 such modules could be implemented. So we standardize that. If there are 45 households, then either you have to implement 5 modules or 4 modules, depending on your whatever you want to do. So the way a diesel generator is standardized, like 5 kVA, 7 or 10 kVA or something like that, or 5 kilowatt or 10 kilowatt, something like that. So you won't get a diesel generator of say 6 kilowatt. Either you have to take a 5 or a 10. This one. So in that manner, we have standardized the thing so as to have easier scale up, and that really helped in scaling up. So when you are designing a program, or you are teaching somebody to design a program, so it is extremely important that how we standardize the thing, and not just standardize the thing. So we standardize the charging station and also the DC microgrid, as you can see from the slide. So DC microgrid with different capacities, but it also helps in ensuring quality of the product and also quality of the installation. So the quality of the product is important, we all know, but in case of a system which has to be installed in a house or in an institution or any other place, the quality of the installation is equally important. So you have the solar lantern or the solar home systems or any other devices which is of good quality, which is marked as BIS standard or international standards quality, or the German standard quality as it is called, the best standard quality. But if your installation is proper and there are some short circuits or there are some fuse of problems, then the good quality product will also not work. So the quality installation is equally important with quality of the product. And to manage quality installation, you have to have technicians and operators who have to be trained accordingly. Unless you train them with this one, then they can get a quality product. They don't know how to install, so they will do a very shabby job of installation, and you will have the problem. This one, and responsive after sales support. So you can put up a system, but if there are no after sales support, then how do you run the system? I will give an example. For example, say Lucknow may have a showroom for say Mercedes car or something like that, a foreign made car, this one, a Ford car. Lucknow may have a showroom for that. But say Sitapur doesn't have a showroom for that. Now, if somebody in Sitapur buys a Mercedes car and the engine goes wrong, something happens to that Mercedes car, neither he can bring the car to Lucknow for rectification, or he has to get a technician from Lucknow by paying a higher price and taking care of his travel and everything for one day and get his car rectified. So so there is a lot of problems. So a responsive after sales service which is available at your doorstep is extremely important for solar energy or renewable energy system to function. So unless we have that type of ecosystem developed for quality installation, responsive after sales support, then the system definitely is not going to work. And most importantly, the user satisfaction. So finally, at the end, the user should be satisfied with what he or she has been provided. If he or she is not satisfied, then he or she is not going to say by word of mouth to his or her neighbor that I have purchased this thing and it is a great item. If the communication is like that, then the neighbor would also purchase the same item. If the person says that it is not a good item, I've been cheated and it doesn't work properly, then definitely in that area no company can sell their product. So user is extremely important. So these are solar microgrid that we have implemented, either AC or DC at different places, which can provide say minimum 4 to 5 hours of light. And where we have implemented, wherever electricity is this one are unreliable, for example, in markets. So in many markets in Amethi, Jagdishpur, Azamgarh, Varanasi, in all these places in the rural markets, we have implemented this type of microgrids where both the shops as well as the households are getting supply in the evening time, their lighting energy needs, or maybe a small fan or something like that. In Kanpur, Dehat, and all these places, we have implemented this. And these are all implemented with a local energy and entrepreneur who also contribute 30 to 40% of the hardware cost, and the rest is raised under corporate social responsibility. And the entrepreneur then charges a monthly fee or a daily fee tariff from the consumers, which is maybe ₹5 or maybe on a day or on a monthly basis, maybe 100, 120 rupees, 150 rupees. And using that money, they take care of the system and also earn some money for their own self. And many of these entrepreneurs are actually women entrepreneurs. So it's an additional or a livelihood for them. These are some of the integrated domestic energy system, as I said, the cook stove and the solar light. So which we have implemented mostly in Bihar, but some in UP also. We also implemented a mini grid, microgrid, and picogrid, both AC and DC, to showcase that 3 different business management and technical models tried out at different locations. So you can see the 3 different models that is mentioned in the slide. You can read through this one to prove that one size do not fit all is not the solution. So you may have to have different type of solutions, and depending on the need or demand in a given area, the solution have to be provided. If I provide a solution, same solution to everybody, then it may work somewhere, it may not work at a different place. So while we have to have a standardized solution, but at the same time, we have to have different solutions. So all the different solutions, say 5 or 6 solutions, have to be standardized and accordingly promoted in different areas. And then only one can scale up at a fast pace. So these are the different type of microgrids and systems that we had implemented. The one at the middle picture, this one in the second is where it is written, where there are 3 junction boxes you can see, and the box and the orange color big box. So this is a DC microgrid where we put all the equipments, the battery and everything inside a box, so that there is no, so the entrepreneur can also, he also cannot abuse the system or take or abuse the battery or overuse the battery. So there is a lock which can also be opened by the technician, the energy entrepreneur who is supporting it. So you have to have one design different type of system depending on the local need and requirement. This one. So the future that we see, convergence of the grid and mini grid. As I said, almost all villages in India has been electrified with grid. There are also microgrids which are coming up. So the future that we see is a convergence of these mini grids with the grid, and the future that I visualize is that we will, maybe 5 years or 10 years down the line, we will have microgrids on almost all the places. And these microgrids would also draw energy from rooftop solar that might be put up by those who can afford it. And these microgrids should also be interconnected with the main grid. So the interconnected rooftop solar with microgrids connected with the main grid. And each one of these system taking electricity or giving or feeding electricity to the other. So this is a type of system, a very advanced smart system that we are going to see, including in UP. I visualize it can happen in the next 5 years, or maybe if not in 5, it might start in the next 5 years. The process should start in the next 5 years in a big way. And maybe in the next 10 to 15 years, I think it will become a norm rather than an exception. Now it is an exception. There are a few places where it is working like that. But I think in the next 5 to 10 years or 15 years, it is going to be a norm, and it is going to take place everything, because given the fact that the climate change concerns, the energy transition that is happening, the different type of models that are being worked out, the nature of renewable energy. So keeping all this in mind, I think the system should work in that manner. There is another area where a lot of work needs to be done and where we are also trying to work is near universal electric. We have, as I said, we have already achieved near universal electrification at household level by 2020. I think 98.99+% households have already been connected in India. There might be few households here and there which has not been connected. However, power quality and reliability is still a challenge in many states. This one. So going beyond the Lighting a Billion Lives program, we started a program called Re-Energizing Livelihood, Empowering Lives. And under that program, we are implementing a project, Sustainable Energy in Micro Enterprises for Income and Livelihood Management, which is in short called SMILE. So trying to bring SMILE in the face of the entrepreneurs who have suffered the most because of this corona pandemic in the last 2 years. This one. So what is the problem that we are trying to address? So rural micro enterprises mostly are unorganized, without access to modern technologies, market linkages, and affordable credit, and primarily rely on unreliable and polluting energy sources, resulting in high input costs, hindered product quality, and thus grapple with a vicious cycle of poor income. And this is the key problem that we are trying to address. How we are trying to address? So you would be improving the energy efficiency and use of renewable energy technologies in these micro enterprise clusters to improve their productivity, enhance income of the entrepreneurs, and thereby improving their lives and livelihood. So in UP, and our focus state is UP. So in UP, we have selected three enterprise. One is the Munch making in Amethi, the Munch bus in Amethi and Prayagraj, the toy making cluster in Varanasi, and the Varanasi, again, the weaving, the silk sari weaving cluster, the Banarasi sari weaving cluster in Varanasi. These are the three areas we target.
Hello, respected participants, please unmute yourself so that sir can speak. You are visible. Ajay Ashok Nikam, you are visible. You are audible to all the participants. Yourself, sir can speak properly. Ajay Ashok Nikam, please unmute yourself. Ajay Ashok Nikam, please mute yourself so that we can.
Ajay Ashok Nikam. Ajay Ashok Nikam, are you there? After which, Nagra, please mute yourself. Please do that because this is making unnecessary noise and disturbance.
Okay, thank you. So we all know Varanasi is globally renowned for Banarasi silk sarees, and what we are trying to do is that we are all the looms that were running on electricity, so they are getting unreliable supply, and because of this unreliability, what was happening? The thread was getting what do you call it? The silk thread that they use for making these sarees. So because if suddenly there is an electricity cut, then this thread get disjointed. This one, and because of this, there are a lot of joints in the saree, and resulting in that they get lower price. So we have solarized these looms. We have provided a solar system there, a 2 kilowatt power plant which can connect 4 to 5 looms. And that has introduced reliability of supply and resulting in higher product quality. And because of the higher product quality, there is the income of these loom owners has gone up because they can now command a better price for the saree that is being weaved in solar looms than the sarees that are being weaved in normal electric looms. And we used a hybrid model so that whenever there is a power cut, the solar looms will automatically, the solar system would automatically turn on, and without any, without cutting down the line, like an inverter, a solar inverter. It's more like a solar inverter with preferred solar charging. So first the solar thing will be used, and then only the grid supply will be used. This one. So we have already implemented around 700 such systems in Varanasi, in across 4 or 5, I think 5 or 6 villages. We are now trying to expand our work by also providing them with DC systems so that the efficiency can be improved. That's a work in progress. So solarization of power looms, and also we will be covering the reeling machines with high efficiency motor. So this is something, the work in progress. By end of this year or early next year, we hope that will make more impact going beyond the 700 systems that we have already implemented. So these are the solar powered looms. You can see the way it is working. So total this one, no, systems and there's an average incremental income of almost like 6,000 rupees per month than what they have been earning earlier. So now more than 6,000 rupees is an additional income that they're getting. This is the wooden lacquer and toys clustered in Varanasi, where we have found that the monthly electricity consumption is about 100 kilowatt hour per month for those who are using a 0.5 HP motor, and 200 kilowatt hour per month for 1 HP motor. Electricity bill is averaging about 1,000 rupees per month, including the fixed charge. So what we are trying to do is that we are improving the efficiency of the electric motor that are currently being used, and use solar complementary energy source, so that so that their reliability is increased and they can use a cleaner source of energy for their requirement. This one. And with the government of India giving high impetus to toy making in the country, so I think if you can develop the system, solar-based system for toy making, then definitely it is going to have a lot of use, not just in Varanasi but also in other parts of India. This is something a munch making in mostly in Amethi and near to the river, basically in Amethi and in Prayagraj. This is taking place. And again, here we would be the solution that we are trying to provide based on renewable energy or solar energy is that twisting, rubbing, and reeling of the rope fibers can be mechanized by introduction of electric motors. So currently they are doing it manually, and that's a very drudgerous role. So we are thinking of providing solar-based solutions so that it can be done mechanically, and that would help in the increasing productivity, which can go up to 4 times, from 2 kg per day to almost 8 kg per day of rope reeling can be done in that area. So these are mostly in Amethi, Sultanpur, Prayagraj, and Ambedkar Nagar districts of UP, which are major centers of both. Actually, they use this grass called sarpat grass to make these beautiful items. And these are just 3 clusters we are starting with. We'll also do many more, cover many more clusters in years to come. So we are also working with and has also implemented solar power boards with hybrid charging station. Again, solar plus grid and lithium and battery pack. This is in Varanasi, Assi Ghat in Varanasi, this picture. And we have introduced, I think, 20-30 boards in Varanasi, which are clean, with efficient trolling motor, which run on lithium batteries there. And we have expanded this work in Chitrakut Ghat, in the Mandakini River in Chitrakut, where again, roughly around 30 have been implemented. So in Varanasi, they were using diesel engine earlier. So we retrofitted this diesel engine with solar powered, lithium powered, solar energy powered lithium batteries for the trolling motor. Whereas in case of Chitrakut, they were running the boats. They were not running the boats with diesel. They were hand-driven boats. So we basically were trying to reduce the drudgery by introducing these automated or electric boats there. As a step forward, we are now trying to work out electric vehicle in Chitrakut, so as in the rural areas. Hopefully, we can start that project very soon. This one, and this is something that we will be working. We have very recently entered into or in the process of entering into an agreement with the UP Ajivika program, that UP Rural Livelihood Promotion Society, I think, what is called the Ajivika program in UP. And they would be starting women-led solar energy enterprise or Urja Kendras in all the districts. They have started with Kanpur Dehat, which has very recently been opened. And they're going to do it in many of the other districts to provide livelihood opportunities to the women self-help groups in rural areas. And we would be the knowledge partner and technical partner to provide them the different solutions. So what we plan to do is that these women can provide different solutions to their self-help group members in the rural areas, and also at the same time earn some money by selling and servicing the different products. We are doing a similar thing in case where almost 25 enterprises have been started along with the Bihar Rural Livelihood Promotion Society for providing livelihood opportunities to these women self-help groups and members. So if we are to see it, how do we develop the ecosystem for renewable energy promotion in rural areas? So the 6 important, I would say, the lever or the that is key to the success based on the experience that we have gained over the last many years is that technologies should be right and resource efficient. We cannot, if some technology is good in UP, it need not necessarily be good in Karnataka. So we have to see that it is the right technology for stage. And of course, resource efficient. There should be markets both for forward and backward linkages. We just cannot provide a technical training to these entrepreneurs and say that they can develop the market. It is not possible. So we also have to see that we are also providing them hand-holding support to develop the forward and backward linkages. When I say forward and backward linkages, that means their supply chain and their demand or the demand with the end consumer. So we also have to guide them how to ascertain the demand, from where they will get their supply, from where they will get their finances, all these things, and use it as a package to provide them the required hand-holding support, and then only the entrepreneurship can grow in the rural areas. To promote these renewable energy technologies. Finance, flexible and easy to access. So you cannot have one size fits all finance. Now most of the banks have very rigid financing norms that they will give you finance under a given terms and conditions, and there are hardly any flexibility there, and that creates a lot of problem because the financing needs of, say, an entrepreneur, a male entrepreneur and a female entrepreneur might be different. So we have to see that whether we can make certain changes at the local level within the structured boundary conditions of the bank. And the idea should be to arrange the finance and not to create a hindrance by making a rigid rule. If you can provide some flexibility which is easier to access, I think there will be number of entrepreneurs who would get benefited and would join this business from renewable energy in the rural areas. Capacity building is required at all levels. When I say all levels, it is not just entrepreneur or rural areas, but also at the urban areas, and the person who is say sanctioning a loan should also be capacitated for him or her to understand the business plan of the entrepreneur, the technology that the entrepreneur is going to propose. So they also needs to be explained. The block level, the block BDO, the block development officer, whoever is subsidizing this product, is one of the providing the government subsidy. He or she also needs to be trained so that they know about the technology and accordingly take a decision. Now, policies should be demand-based and enabling. It cannot be a top-down approach. So you first have to understand why I should change a policy. What is that is missing in the policy? And if it is demand-based, then the policies are always good. If it is not demand-based, if somebody at the top sitting at an air-conditioned room is making a policy without knowing the ground reality, then definitely it is not going to serve the purpose. So it has to be demand-based. And most important in our case in TERI, we have found institutions, that is local institutions, to support and steer the ecosystem development is extremely important. This is the 6th point is missed by everyone. And this is something that we really want, that there should be some local institutions who could be trained, who could facilitate the ecosystem development in the local area to provide support to rural entrepreneurs to join the renewable energy bandwagon, or what you call the renewable energy promotion. So this is extremely important, the institution, and we have empirically proved that how important the institutions are. So this in a nutshell, my presentation. We have half an hour left, I think. This one we can take few questions in case of any clarifications or anything. You can raise your hand, then ask questions. This one I will try to answer and satisfy you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation, and you give a detailed insight on the rural scenario, and you gave us a outlook of the opportunities for rural employment in renewable energy sector and how the boatmen have increased income in that regard. Thank you for your various insights. Now I would like to request the participant to ask the queries to sir. If they have any queries, they can ask to sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, this is Dr. Ramalingam, professor from Coimbatore speaking, sir.
Yeah, please continue. Please go ahead.
Yeah, your presentation was very interesting. It was quite useful, sir. My basic doubt is that since I'm working on wastewater treatment in my college, in Tirupur and other areas, they are using firewoods to generate the steam for wastewater treatment, to evaporate the water for evaporators.
Right.
And is there any system from your Terry to use solar for that to replace the use of the firewood, sir?
So for thermal use, gasification is a more efficient process from direct burning of firewood. So definitely gasification can be this one. Gasifiers can be used. For example, in Hubli and Belgaum districts, we had used gasifiers for bakery oven. Then this what you call the puffed rice making and all such. In Kerala, we have used gasifiers for rubber drying, rubber processing and rubber drying. And these are extremely successful cases, this one. So I think in your case also, what you mentioned, gasifiers could be a better way of this one of using this firewood, because if you burn firewood normally, and if you burn it in gasifier, then the efficiency increases by almost 50 to 60% in case of gasifier.
Because nearly 15 to 30 common effluent treatment plants are there. All are using nearly 20 to 30 tons of the firewood is using to generate the steam, sir. Is it possible to replace with the solar, sir?
So solar thermal can be used, definitely. Tamil Nadu has a lot of sunshine, so solar thermal can be used to generate steam, this one, and you can use that. That solar thermal steam is being used in many industries. This one, that can also be used, but otherwise gasifiers are also there. You can easily generate steam using gasifiers.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. I'll contact you through our mail and guide me so that I can give some tips to the industry in this area, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Most welcome.
Any more participants who want to ask queries?
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Can you hear me? Sir, my name is Jishnu. Sir, I'm a research scholar at the Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology. Hello, sir.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. Sir, my doubt is your talk was very informative regarding how we are applying these renewable energy sources in rural development. So, sir, I have heard that this access to clean drinking water is a major issue in most of the rural villages in all across India.
Yeah.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello.
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
So my question is that, sir, how far are we, have we achieved or have we moved forward in using the solar powered desalination units in rural areas of India, so that we could extract clean drinking water from the groundwater, which is mostly having high salt content.
So your question is that how can we use solar based desalination? Is that so?
Yes, sir. Exactly, sir.
Yeah, so of course solar can be used for desalination. There are in Israel they have done it very wonderfully. This one in India also, I think there are some researchers are trying to do that. If you write to me, I can connect you to one of my junior university alumni who is exactly working on similar lines. I think he's from
Okay,
central government CSR, one of the CSIR lab.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so they are trying to develop the solar based desalination plants for use in the coastal regions.
Okay.
So it can be done. There are technologies available.
Sir, I don't know,
commercial
like,
technologies which has been.
Okay, sir. So my doubt regarding this is, sir, like, this like on a direct look, it does not appear like it is directly linked with energy from sun. But now even in the urban areas, now when we are using any electrical power based desalination units, like our purifiers, we are actually putting in some kind of energy into it. So if we could replace that with a direct sun based system, mostly, sir, in the districts, in the states of Tamil Nadu, Andhra, like that, throughout the year, we are having high radiation, high solar radiation. So if we could, yes, sir.
Yeah, right. It can be done. So that's what I'm saying. So it can be done. So if you send me a mail, then I can try to connect you to the right person, since I have not worked on solar desalination. So
okay, sir. Sure, sir.
Yes, it can be done, but then I have to connect you to the right person for you to know more about it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any further question? Please go ahead.
Sir, will you permit me to ask one more question, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, is it since the windmill is installation of windmill costs minimum 50 lakhs, sir? Is it possible to install a mini windmill every home, sir? Is there any such possibilities there?
Yeah. Right. So there are now companies who are developing small wind systems, both vertical and horizontal based. This one. So of course the price is still not very low.
Okay.
But then I'm hoping that in the years to come, with economies of scale, the price will also come down. So comparing with solar, say for example, if in solar the cost of electricity generation is, say, for a small system is 3 rupees per kilowatt hour. This one for a windmill, for a small wind system, it will be about 4 or 4.50. This one, no. So I am hoping that if it can come down to in the next few years to, let's say, around 3.5, then it will become. Then many in the coastal regions or high wind regions can put up such systems over in their house. So these are systems of 3 to 5 kilowatt, and which is extremely fine. That means for a house, you don't need more than that.
Thank you very much, sir.
Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes. Yes. Please go ahead.
Sir, myself Debashri from Centurion University, working as an assistant professor. Sir, I have an query that as Government of India has implemented many renewable energy products in India, but still somehow it is not implemented in rural area. So as per you, what are the major concerns which has been taken for diffusion of these renewable products in India, in rural area of India?
So as I said, the renewable energy promotion or the diffusion in the country started with the rural areas in 1980s, and across till 2000, I think it was mostly the rural areas where the renewable energy were being implemented. The urban phenomenon is a recent phenomenon. Now in the rural areas, because initially many of the technologies failed because of the lack of after sales service and other challenges, and the remoteness and other challenges. So there is a negative impact of the technology. So that's why it is important that any technology is first implemented in the urban areas and perfected. Once it is perfected and the cost can be or the price can be brought down, then we can go to rural areas. So now the many of the households a little skeptical about the renewable energy. I think that negativity has to be removed. This one, and then it will start. This one, the scale up can easily happen in the rural areas. It's already happening in many areas. As I said, we have implemented more than 50,000 solar systems in Bihar, in 5 districts. This one, so there is a demand, but then one has to reach out to those areas, explain and prove that the system can work, and create that local ecosystem for the support, for post installation support. I'm sure that the people will start taking it.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir, good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I have 2 questions, and thanks for your informative talk. The first question is regarding the solar drying process. How could be how long the India has been TERI has been involving in solar drying process? And second question, what are all the
can you repeat your question?
Hello.
Can you repeat your question?
Yes, sir. Sir, regarding the solar drying, what are all the methods that TERI is applying now? Secondly, what are all the opportunities for faculties inside the India to approach the TERI for any projects and all?
Okay. So in TERI, so let me answer your second question first. So in TERI is a research institute, is a not-for-profit research institute, which is run based on the projects that we get from either government or private sector or other organization. This one. So one way of collaboration is that we can collaborate between 2 institutes, TERI and your institute can collaborate on certain things. And then we can write proposals and submit to government or another organization, and if it gets through, then we can work together, and that's how we have been doing it in any organization. This is one way of doing it. The other way of doing is that you can also collaborate with the TERI School of Advanced Studies, which is a university, specialized university, part of TERI, though a separate entity, but a deemed university. And you can also collaborate on different type of researches with the university. Regarding the solar, your first question was on solar drying, I think.
Yes, sir.
So solar drying, we are currently we are working on solar. We are not. I would say that we have not extensively worked on solar drying. We have worked on solar, some extent we have worked on solar drying and also working on solar cold storages and other things. We have worked on biomass gasifier based drying system for large cardamom drying and many other things. This one, but yes, definitely solar drying is an area where a lot of work can be done. We didn't work because solar drying work was already being taken forward by some of the government run institute, like the Renewable Energy Institute in Udaipur, Sardar Swaran Singh Institute of Renewable Energy in Kapur in Punjab. So they have been doing a lot of work on solar drying. So we didn't want to replicate what they have been doing. So we have not extensively worked on this particular thing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I will definitely come back to you for future proposals. Thank you.
Any further question?
No.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hello, sir. Actually, if I want to model any hybrid renewable energy system, how can I measure the feasibility of that particular system? Because without installing that system to particular area, it is might not be possible. So, is there any chance?
Come again. I couldn't get you. What you just?
Sir, actually, if I want to model any hybrid renewable energy system for any particular location, including wind, solar, biomass, and hybrid system. If how is the feasibility can be checked for that particular system? Hypothetically, I can develop that system, but what is the feasibility rate?
So that you have to do a feasibility study. This one, and for designing, there are a lot of softwares now available which we can use. This one for designing the system, for technical design of the system. But for feasibility, you have to do a feasibility study. To try to understand whatever system you are trying to develop. For example, say we have to develop a system for, as I said, we gave an example about the solarization of the Munch making cluster in Amethi. So we have done a feasibility trying to understand how they are, for what purpose energy is used in that cluster, what type of products they are producing, what is the capacity of the motors that they are using, how much money they are spending on their energy bills and all these things, and then try to understand, can solar be used for electrifying those motors? What would be my cost? Can they pay? Can the beneficiaries or the users pay for that? And all these things. So based on that, we worked out the feasibility. Now, the feasibility may not work out for everything. It might happen that there are certain applications where it is more feasible to apply solar. There are certain applications where it may not be feasible to apply solar. For example, if you are introducing solar for a low load, high value, say, system, like where the consumption is low, the energy consumption is low, but if you can introduce solar, it will help in improving reliability. And because of the improved reliability, I can earn more money by, like say tailoring or weaving, where the load is hardly less than say 500 watt. The motor is less than 500 watt. Okay. But if I can introduce reliability, I can work additional 5 hours. If I can work additional 4 to 5 hours, then my income increases by almost 30 to 40%. Okay. Now it becomes so solar might be a better choice for such areas. Vis-a-vis, say there is a grinding machine where the load is say 5 kilowatt. So I have to introduce solar of 5 kilowatt, but then the rate, that means that I will get, the price that I will get for grinding, the additional increment that in my income will not be much, because I'm not running the grinding machine for almost say 18 hours a day and 7 days a week. It is only being run whenever somebody will come with their flour or rice or something like, or paddy or something like that, no? And I can accordingly manage it. Whenever there is electricity, I can use grid electricity to run my system. So my income may not increase in the commensurate with the investment that I will make. So I have to see if I am making a lower investment and higher incremental income, then that is more feasible than the other case.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
That you have to analyze.
Okay, sir. Sure.
Any further question? Maybe another, we have 5-10 minutes more.
Excuse me, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, as far as solar photovoltaic panels are concerned, is there any provision for the betterment of the efficiency?
Can you introduce yourself?
Sir, myself Harish Khani, I am a research scholar from Jodhpur, Rajasthan.
Okay. So your question is, how can we improve efficiency?
Yes, sir.
Of solar panels or what?
Yes, sir. Solar panels.
Photovoltaic or
Yes, sir.
thermal?
Yes, sir. Photovoltaic.
Okay. So currently, currently, as far as I know, the commercial efficiency of solar panels are roughly around 20%, maybe 21, maybe 19 in the panels that we use in India. If it can, for smaller panels, the efficiency is low or less than the panels of say 450 watt. This one, no, 450 watt panels, the efficiency is high. There are also panels of 700 watt where the efficiency is further high. But for 10 watt panel, the efficiency is very low. So that's this thing. What is happening is that lot of work is going on improving the efficiency. And I had a meeting, or rather, I had the opportunity to meet the what we call the father of this one, the most authoritative person on solar photovoltaic, Dr. Professor Martin Green. He is based in University of New South Wales. You can Google his name and you can find this credential. So Professor Martin Green, so they are working on what they call it Parkskovite solar or something like that, which is a new material. This one, and when I met him, I think 3 years back, he told me that by 2040 we would be in a position to have solar efficiency and solar panel efficiency of roughly around 35 to 40% in the next 20 years. This one, I asked the specific question, the question that you have asked me, exactly the same question I had asked him. This one, and that was the answer he gave to me. Since I am not from material physics, this one, so I thought that it's better that whatever answer I got, I should communicate it to you. In lab scale, he has already attained efficiency. That means his lab has already attained efficiency of 35 to 40%. He said to make it commercially available or viable, it will take another 15 to 20 years time. So we can very well say that in another next 20 years, we can the efficiency of solar panels will roughly get doubled. And if that is the case, which means the price will become half. If today it is 20 rupees per watt is the price, then in 20 years time it will become readjusted to inflation. It will become 10 rupees per watt peak, which means coal will have no value. Nobody is going to use coal because then coal will become costlier like gold, whereas solar will become this one cheaper like whatever you feel to say.
Okay, sir.
Only problem with solar would be that, of course, with increase in efficiency, your land requirement or the space requirement will also become half over a period of time. Will also come down gradually. So that problem will also get resolved. The only problem that will remain with solar is its intermittency. What do you do during the cloudy weather? This one, no, and for that storage is extremely important. Storage price now is about $120 per kilowatt hour. This one. So we are assuming that in another 20 years time, the storage price should come down to about say $60 or $70 per kilowatt hour. And by that, if it happens so in the next 5 to 10 years, then solar will become extremely cheap. Also, green hydrogen is being worked out. And if green hydrogen technology proceeds the way everybody is thinking it should be, including in India, I think the government has recently launched a National Green Hydrogen Mission, then solar can be used to produce green hydrogen, and that green hydrogen can be used to produce both electricity and it can be used for running car and thermal use and everything. So that's how the technology development is going to take place over a period of time.
Thanks a lot, sir, for your clarification. Actually, sir, the Martin Green, the professor who is well-known person in the field of solar, actually, his team is working on the perovskite solar cell, actually, right? And the present in the present scenario, the 90 to 95% market is captured by crystalline silicon.
Right.
So in that present scenario, that was actually I am asking.
So in the present scenario, as and when technology would be invented, then only the new technology would come into the fore, no? Because everything depends on the viability, economic viability, and and technical viability. So technical viability has already been established by Martin Green, Professor Martin Green. The economic viability or the financial viability has to be established, and that will take little time. But till then, this crystalline solar, in between we also had thin film solar, but then it didn't work out well. So crystalline solar is going to say, and gradually other type of materials will also come into the picture. In crystalline solar also a lot of research is going on to improve efficiency. This one, there is a work going on material science to improve not just the efficiency, but see why the solar cost, this one became, why solar became cheap during the period of 2010 to 2015 or something like that. Is nothing. Is one definitely is the economies of scale. The Chinese factory started producing large scale solar panels. This one, no. So this is of course one reason, but this is not the only reason. And most of the researchers and policymakers and others miss out this point. The main reason for reduction of solar price is not the economics of scale achieved by the Chinese factories, but because of the achievement in improvement in the material efficiency of silicon. So if X unit of silicon was required to produce say 100 watt of solar earlier, that X has become now X by 3. And that's the reason why you have higher, why this price has come down. So that's also a technological development. Who knows, it will become X by 5. This one vis-a-vis the requirement that was there in 2010. So the silicon requirement will also come down gradually, and that will also make this panel more efficient. Answer. Hello, does it answer your query? You just asked a question.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.